Hello guys, welcome to another video. I'm going to break this up into parts as some of you may already know some of this, so feel free to skip around as I will have timestamps. First thing I will cover is different min-maxing things. You'll want to do for gear before PvPing, as most have already done this. You can PvP without it though, just know that you're at a disadvantage. First thing I'm going to cover is Datacrons. So I'm going to bring up the legacy UI and show you where the Datacrons are located right here. You can then see the list of Datacrons and whatnot. The ones that I do not have are presence personally, though you don't really need the presence ones. I mean, you can go for completion and you might as well get them. But I've got all the ones that give me mastery and all the ones that give me endurance, which do help me in PvP. None of these stats scale with like class buffs, so like the percentage increases. So like if I just get a Inquisitor's raid buff, my mastery wouldn't scale with the mastery I got from my Datacrons. Like it's just additional mastery on top of that. So it doesn't scale even further out of your range if you were to not have them. They're very good to get, but you won't be missing out too badly if you do not have them. Datacrons definitely recommend getting these. Obviously, you'll need an Imperial and a Republic character to get all the Datacrons. Don't rush them all at once because it may not be too good for your mental if you don't really like doing that. Just do them slowly and casually. Eventually, you'll get them all. Then we'll go into another important one, which is companion buffs, basically, is what you would probably call it. So each one of these is going to give you 1% increased to whatever respective thing that they do. So for example, I get 1% bonus health here. I get 1% bonus critical hit damage. This one I get 1% extra healing received. And this is 1% extra critical hit chance, and this is 1% extra accuracy. Now, every single class has the same 5 buffs. They're just in different orders depending on the companion. You can mix and match. If you have a boosted character, you most likely already have this already completed on whether Republic or Imperial. It doesn't actually matter which one, as long as you've got all 5 buffs. This will help your character tremendously in both PvE and PvP. This is something highly recommended if you're going to go any accuracy at all, because if you don't have the 1% accuracy, you're going to have to get a lot more accuracy to reach the thresholds, which is definitely not recommended. It's way easier to just go do this, so definitely do this. Then we have another one, which would be class buffs. So for example, once you hit chapter 2 and each one of the original class stories, so for this one needs to be Agent, Bounty Hunter, Inquisitor, and Sith Warrior. So you get these 4 buffs. However, if you're in a guild that runs the Omni Magnification, you can totally bypass all of this and you can just click this and it'll give you all the buffs. This is super good. If you find a guild that has this and you don't have all the class buffs, highly recommend, just using it. Let's take advantage of it. You can put it on your bar and you can use it, but anytime you travel somewhere, it'll get removed from your bar and you'll have to go back to guild and you'll have to replace it or just activate it again. So that's one thing that's really nice to know. Class buffs are important, but you don't necessarily need to get it if you get into a guild that has this. Then we'll go into another very important part where a lot of people kind of overlook. So for example, Augments. In PvP, you don't have a bolster, I guess you could say. It's not really a bolster, but you don't actually get like stats. So if you don't have Augments, you're missing out on just tons of stats. You don't get anything from bolster for Augments. They do not bolster for Augments at all, sorry. I think that's probably the clearest way I can get that out. So for example, I've got 171 endurance, 171 power, 130 alacrity. All of my augments are like that. So this equals around 6,000 something stats or more that I have over most players just because I have all these augment slots filled. Now, you don't need the best augments like I have. You can get lesser augs and they would work just fine. Any augment is better than no augment. These things are very expensive, and I'm hoping the next tier of augments are not as expensive because it definitely is not new player friendly. Though if you want to make money, cartel market items go for well over $1 billion, and on top of that, when you make tech fragments once you've done like needing them for your characters. You can then farm tech fragments, and you can buy OEM and RPMs from Dakana on the fleet, which is in the supply section. She will sell you that stuff, and then you can turn around and sell that for like 180 mil to like 200 mil per, which will allow you to make some money and eventually maybe buy them yourself or craft them yourself. I wouldn't worry about it too much. It is definitely something that will give somebody advantage. Let's say if you only had 286 augments and somebody had 300 augments, you're going to be at a disadvantage compared to them, but it's not that big. Skill is always going to outweigh that gear. And on top of that, knowledge in MMOs is what's most important. It comes knowledge, then skill. In this game, gear isn't as important as it is in WoW, but it is important to at least fill your slots in this game. So for example, in WoW, a couple item levels, let's say 10 item levels or more, it's probably going to make quite a bit of difference. In this game, it doesn't actually make that much of a difference. You can still compete relatively on a competitive level to that person. What's usually going to be the difference is either knowledge, player skill, or the current meta. That class might just be better. Baseline, so therefore, just having extra stats on top of you just means that they're going to have easier time outperforming you, probably with less effort too. Now with that out of the way, we're going to go into explaining if you're missing any of these, your differences stat-wise to somebody else is going to be varying, whether it's small or large. It really depends on which one that you're missing. So for example, augments, you can't really afford to lose those, so try to fill those slots as soon as possible. Companion buffs, as long as you have the accuracy and the critical hit ones and the healing one, those are pretty good. Max health is nice, but not always necessary. They are very easy to get. If you boost a character, you probably automatically complete it. I think that's still a thing. I believe the first time you sub, you get a free boost anyway, so you might as well. Now, going into optional things, these are things that you don't need to do, but you can if you want to. Would be to learn your PvE rotation and specifically your burst opener to perfect it on a level 10 dummy. So what I mean by a level 10 dummy, I'll show you guys real quick. Excuse me, because I gotta go over here because I'm so far away. But on Onderon Stronghold, there actually is one here, so you can do it here if you wanted to. So this guy is a level 10 dummy. This guy will give you more accurate hits in PvP. It does not require accuracy, so if you're a power tech for something or something like that, you won't have heat management issues because you won't actually miss on this dummy. So whatever your hits on this dummy are going to be similar to what you hit in PvP. And on top of that, you're going to see more max hits on this dummy than you are on, let's say, this dummy, for example. This one requires 10% accuracy and has heavy armor. So just keep that in mind. Hit this one. You cannot parse on this one, but you can practice your rotation. You can practice your burst opener, which I highly recommend, because if you don't know how to burst somebody down, you don't know how to use your burst opener, you're really not being as effective in PvP. And if you don't know your burst windows, you're really not going to kill anybody. And on top of that, if you don't know how to do at least sustain damage, which you should learn, especially if you're a ranged player. If you're a ranged player, you need to learn your sustained rotation so you can then be, how do you call it, more impactful. So let's say if you're doing a lot of damage as a ranged DPS, chances are you're never going to get hit because people are going to die too quickly to hit you, especially if you've got melee in the front lines pretty much protecting you. So you need to know how to do a lot of damage to basically make sure that you're going to be safe for the rest of the match. Otherwise, you're going to be playing from the back, and that's not going to feel good, it's not going to be fun, and if you just don't know how to do damage, you're just going to have a bad time though, like overall. Now, one thing I would recommend, before going to bed, or just whenever you can, just practice the burst opener for your class or your spec, and maybe like PvE, like parse rotation, just for a little bit, maybe 2-3 minutes every day, or whenever you can. Especially if you can do it before bed, I would recommend that. And then just eventually it'll become muscle memory, and once it becomes muscle memory, you can then focus on what's going on screen around here, instead of having your eyes down here looking at your abilities like, oh, what do I use next? Well, you already know. You don't need to think about that. And another thing that I could really recommend is playing with audio. I play with audio because in 2.0, you used to be able to hear your ability procs like some of the grunts, some of the special sound effects that your characters make used to be ability procs. So before we had this, so let me show you this real quick. Before we had this glowy thing here, our character would make a sound when we got this proc. And that was the only way we knew, unless we were looking at this, which this is a mess, by the way. We've got way too many of these now. It's really confusing. But once you know it better, you can look through it a lot easier. But we didn't have these back in the day, and that's why I play with sound. But another thing that you can do when you're playing with sound is learn the... I guess it's the sound, like the sound that your abilities make. So for example, Battering Assault will always sound like that, Massacre always sounds like that. Like hearing those sounds will let you know that you're hitting the target and when that GCD is up or that GCD is going, so you can immediately go into your next GCD. Now, one thing that I will say real quick that is rather important, if you're not very fast at hitting your buttons, I would turn this up. The ability queue is very useful for people with higher ping, but it's also very good for people that don't hit their buttons very fast. If you're playing operative, for example, sometimes you might want to lower this a little bit just to prevent yourself from double rolling. This does mean that you have to button mash a little bit more, but typically you should be button mashing in PvP, but just, it's there, it helps. I highly recommend checking out if you need a little extra assistance. I do recommend for most classes running 2.5 to at least 0.5 because we can react, like I think it's like 0.2 milliseconds or something, like if you're really, really fast. And that's like, I think that's like e-sport like level. So the average person isn't really like that, especially with the latency with this game and other things. I think 0.5 is just a safe place to be. Even 0.75 would be okay, but I think at least 0.5 for most specs is perfectly fine. I do disable mine for operative because of the unique case of double rolling. I don't want to accidentally do that. But I'll say that that is most of what you can do in game and as a player to be prepared for PvP. Once you have muscle memory for your rotation, you can focus on your DCDs. You can focus on what your enemy is doing. You're not. Guys aren't glued down here. You're able to be like, oh, this guy's hitting me. Maybe I'll just pop my, Cloak of Pain because it's my lowest cooldown, defensive. And it also gives me some offensive power. So it's usually your go-to. So if I'm getting hit by somebody, I can just pop that, bam. Got some damage reduction. We're not taking as much damage from that guy anymore. And the guy that I'm hitting just popped reflect. All right, so I'm going to swap to the guy that was hitting me, Your eyes are on the screen. They're not down here. And if they're down here, you don't notice what's going on out there. You lose too much health. And then popping this late doesn't make much sense because it's damage reduction. It's not healing. So you need to pop this as you're taking damage or before you take damage. Not too much before you take damage too, because then it gets wasted. And if you're interested in DCD management, I do have a video. I'll put it in the description. It goes over pretty much all of that. And then, right. Optimizing your UI and in-game settings, including keybinds. I will have a video linked in the description too for that. And I highly recommend checking that out. That'll help you basically set up your keybinds. And if you're not very good at, not clicking, I would recommend doing one keybind at a time. In this video, I believe I go over that. Do one keybind at a time and getting used to, hitting it. And you want strafe left and right on A and D. Just get used to that. Whatever you use to move, mouse movement, you lose control. Like I cannot, for example, if I wanted to cast on somebody, I can't go like this and be casting at somebody behind me. But if I have strafe left and right, I'll hold my right click and I hit A. I'm running this way, but I could technically be casting on somebody back there. In that video, I covered that, and it's very important to do that. So definitely check out that video if you're new to keybinding or you're just trying to get into it and you want to slowly keybind. Highly recommend it. I am thinking about remaking that video. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. Then for the final stuff, I would say optimizing your game outside of player performance and actual PC performance. Now, you don't need to be a whiz, but there's many things you can do to tweak your performance to be better. I will recommend for everyone to never mess with regedit unless you know what you're doing and make a backup of it. I say this because if you chase random performance and change something you probably shouldn't, you're going to probably need to reinstall Windows. That's not good. So just avoid doing that, and most things that you find out there probably will help. Now, what I will recommend is rather basic, as I don't see a reason to go in depth here. Number one thing I would recommend is checking your power management settings and potentially getting off power saver when playing, unless you're on a laptop battery, though you will see better performance on a laptop plugged in and not on power saver mode. Desktops also have this setting, so just check it. It's what will cause a lot of FPS spikes in games. Then I will reference Vulkan. I will link this in the description too, the Reddit post, as somebody made a Reddit post guide for this. Sorry, I'm completely butchering what I was wanting to say there. It actually works. It helps pretty well. My resource utilization is not very good for this game. So for example, Star Wars usually utilizes only 0 to 3% of my CPU, not very good. However, an ultra preset with Vulkan, my GPU usage has doubled and my FPS is far more stable. And it's still not over 50% utilization, but I'll take it, and it definitely helps me, so it'll most likely help you guys too. For anyone looking further into things, I recommend studying whatever it is that you may want before doing it, as reverting it is sometimes required. In the end, this video is pretty simple, but I feel like there's good info here that'll help. I know a lot of players don't understand why there's such a stat difference between players. I also know people still struggle to this day with keybinds, and I made a video that still stands up to this day. And then for the Vulkan thing, it's actually kind of a game changer. I was reluctant on publicly talking about it much because I didn't know much about it at the time or how stable it was, but after using it for months without any issues, I recommend it. And anyway, thanks for watching.